Terrence Lehue here, welcoming you to the Intellectual Agrarian podcast. Today's guest is Perry Brown, the Executive Director of Micheal Fields Agricultural Institute. He's done a little bit of everything in his agrarian career, and today he'll talk to us about what got him involved in sustainable agriculture, the importance of cover crops on any farm, and what Micheal Fields has coming new this year. Join us, enjoy. Perry, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Terrence. It's a pleasure being on your show this morning.
All right, now I've already given the audience a brief little background on you, but can you tell us about how you arrived at Micheal Fields Institute and kind of what got you involved in agriculture?
Sure. I've been involved in agriculture all my life. I grew up on a livestock and grain farm in East Central Illinois, and so my educational background is in ag education and animal science. And all my jobs have been ag-related. I was a high school ag teacher. I did international marketing for U.S. food and equipment and livestock products. Even when I worked in the private sector, was still involved in the seed rate business and in agriculture. So, and my marketing background is in agriculture. So I've been involved in agriculture all my life. It's what I love. It's what I know. And I'm always willing to work and help someone that's interested in that area.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. I mean, a lot of guys kind of transition into it at some point, but it's good when you hit the ground running.
Yeah, growing up on a farm, I just knew that, maybe I didn't want to farm directly. I still wanted to be involved in the ag industry and find ways to help people in the ag industry. So it's always been my desire to work in that area, and never thought differently or even looked outside that area.
Wow. So what was it that got you involved in organics and sustainability?
I've always had an interest in, especially the sustainable side. How can we do a better job of farming? How can we reduce our input costs? How can we look at controlling nutrient runoff and soil erosion? So I've always had that interest, even from an early age when I was involved in the family farm and as a high school ag teacher. But the interest in organics came about probably about 12 or 15 years ago. I had an opportunity to do some international marketing work and to promote Midwest ag products, organic ag products, at the BioFach trade show in Nuremberg, Germany. And I hadn't had a lot of exposure to the organic industry before then, but going to that trade show and helping to promote U.S. products there, it really showed me that organics were a thing of the future, and it was an up-and-coming industry, and that really there was all types of organics, and it was just a good way to for people to get involved and do a better job of being sustainable and using less chemicals, less. Hopefully, if you're doing it correctly, less tillage,
Mm-hmm.
And just a better way for the environment. I think that as we'll talk about probably later on some things, we're very much involved here at Micheal Fields in how do we reduce the carbon levels, and we think organic farming is a good way to do that. How do we reduce runoff that affects the Mississippi River and then goes down into the Gulf? So. We're very interested in some of those issues, and climate change also.
So would you say that coming from a conventional background gives you a better perspective on organics?
I think it does. I understand both sides of the industry. I'm not one of these people that says, you have to farm organically. I think that's a choice that a farmer needs to make. Now, do I believe that organic farming is a good way to go? Yes, I do. But I'm not out there telling the farmer that, hey, this is what you do. It's his operation, it's his job, so he has to do what he thinks is best for his operation and for his family and his livelihood. So But I understand both sides of it, coming from the conventional side, and so I think that gives me an advantage.
That's very refreshing
And
to hear.
you know,
I've met a lot of, in my years, my experience is primarily, well, it used to be in farmers markets, and I'd meet all kinds of people in the spectrum. And of course, there are always those diehard organics people that are
yeah.
like willing to put people in jail who don't do organics. So it's very refreshing to hear that sentiment.
Well, there's two sides to everything, and
Mm-hmm.
there's people on the other side that are equally as passionate about the fact that there shouldn't be an organic farmer in the world.
Yep. Met a couple of those too.
Everyone has different. Yes, everyone has different beliefs, and I try to work with whatever beliefs a person has, and try and get the best. It's all about feeding people and making sure that they have a good, safe food supply. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, and so we want to work with everyone trying to do that.
Yep. So Micheal Fields is one of the few agricultural, I guess I'd call it think tanks in organics. How did it start? Kind of what does it do?
Well, Micheal Fields Ag Institute has an interesting background. We've been in existence for 32, almost 33 years now. We had three founders, Christopher and Martina Mann and Ruth Stineker. They were all they'd all come to the U.S. From Europe, and they found a home in East Troy, Wisconsin. And they were followers and believers in the ideas and the theories that Rudolf Steiner had been writing and putting forth for a lot of years. And Rudolf Steiner was very big into organic and sustainable and biodynamic agriculture, and that was his belief, and that's the way that people should farm. So for Christopher and Martina and Ruth then decided they wanted to start a research farm in East Troy that was primarily doing research and looking at sustainable and organic agriculture. So that's been our goal, to do research and policy development work that affects organic and sustainable agriculture, and that's what we've done for most of our 32 or 33 years. To say that thank you for saying that we're one of the few think tanks out there in organic agriculture. I like to think on our policy side, we're very much a think tank organization, because we're always looking at ways, how can we design new programs, develop new ideas that further sustainable and organic agriculture, whether that be through government programs or just through general research that's done to bring light to some of those issues.
What you guys have done is really incredible. So getting along to some of the stuff you guys do, what are the projects Micheal Fields is working on right now?
Well, we have a number of things that we're working on. We have a 200-acre farm that we recently purchased, and we're taking it through the farm transition. We're right in the middle of the first year, and so we're going to do research and collect data on that'll hopefully help other farmers in the future as they make the transition from conventional farming to organic. So we think that's an important item that we're working on right now. We also do a lot of work with cover crops and no-till. We think that's an essential part of any type of agriculture, whether it be conventional agriculture or organic. We believe that a way to improve soil quality and soil fertility is to use cover crops, and it's also a carbon sequestering tool that we think really helps both the environment and the soil. So we're always encouraging farmers, no matter what type of farm that they operate, that the cover crops can be an essential part of your operation, and that you should look at doing that. And then no-till is just about disturbing the soil as little as possible. Mm-hmm. And both conventional and organic farmers do that, and so we encourage that, and we continue to do research on what are the best cover crops to use in a no-till situation. One of the things that we're excited about, and while it's not going to come out of the pipeline tomorrow by any means, but we're working on something called gametotropic incompatibility.
Ooh.
And so somebody's going to say, what is that? And,
yeah.
and to put it in layman terms, we're working on some corn variety lines for organic corn production that do not accept pollen from conventional corn lines. So,
wow,
an
that would be a game
organic,
changer.
yes. So, organic farmers then wouldn't have to worry about contamination from GMO pollen in their corn. So we believe that we're probably somewhere between 5 and 7 years from having any type of products that are releasable out to the public. We're still working on the inbred lines to get them a little more pure. We're about 95% pure with our inbred lines right now. So, but we think that has great potential down the road. And then we're going to continue to work on organic and sustainable policies at both the state and the federal level. We think that our current programs like those offered for NRCS and by NRCS for cost share on doing sustainable practices where you're putting in waterways and strip tilling and those type of things. We think those are important items that we want to see continue in the future for agriculture. And then we've also been involved in Buy Local, Buy Wisconsin, and Farm to Table and Farm to School programs. So we want to see that those continue in the state of Wisconsin also.
So you already covered it a little bit, but kind of what are the policy work? What's the policy work that Micheal Fields tends to work on? Encouraging programs like Buy Local, Buy Wisconsin. Yes, and
seeing that those continue to be funded. We've done a lot of work this year. There was some indication that maybe those items wouldn't be in the state budget this year. So we worked hard to bring lawmakers in and talk with them and work with other partners to encourage those types of programs in the state because we think they're important. And we want to encourage consumers to buy Wisconsin locally made and grown products. We think that's important. And we think it's important also to try and get more local produce into the school system.
Mm-hmm.
Not always an easy task, but we think it's important, and it's good to provide kids with healthy local foods in that program. And then, as most people are probably aware, there's going to be a new farm bill done here in the next couple of years. And so we've been working at the national level to see that sustainable and organic agriculture issues remain in the farm bill and will be funded in the future, and that they continue to be an essential part of U.S. agriculture.
Do you think that lawmakers now are a little bit more receptive to talking about organics and sustainability in these programs, whereas maybe they weren't a dozen years ago?
Yeah, I think we've done a much better job of bringing awareness to organic and sustainable ag issues, and I think lawmakers are much more open to it and much more familiar with it. The real question is in any type of agriculture programs at either the state or the federal level, it's about funding and how do you put that funding into the bill and it's always easy not to fund agriculture compared to some other programs. So that's always a big issue, and I don't blame lawmakers. They don't have an easy choice. Are you going to pay for health care? Are you going to pay for agriculture programs?
Everyone wants low taxes and more programs. So between the two, it's hard to find a happy medium.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about is that, farmers are like anyone. They continue to do the things that they know and that they've had success with. And if you want a farmer to change his practices, you have to provide him with some incentives, or you have to show him the data that shows that, hey, if I'm going to change my practice, it'll put a positive spin on my income or the bottom line of my operation. So, and we think federal dollars can help do that to some extent. And that's just not in organic and sustainable. That's in conventional agriculture also.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are doing a great job showing them some data on this is how it can improve it.
Yes. We do do research and collect data on what's the effect on local food to school systems, and how can cover crops be an economic boon to a program, whether it's conventional or organic. How does that translate into dollars in your pocket in the end?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, if you're using the right cover crops and the right farming system, you're using less inputs, less fertilizer and chemicals in your system, and so that puts more money in your bottom line, and so we try and encourage that, and we collect that data and try and show what the value is if you're using a cover crop. Is there a nitrogen? Is there a phosphorus value to your operation by using those cover crops?
And for a lot of people that may not know, really those inputs and those fertilizers are one of the major expenses on a farm, correct?
Oh, yes. Especially for a conventional operation, outside inputs are a huge cost to that farm. And in some cases in organic agriculture, it is too. You always have to buy seed, and sometimes you have to buy compost or other organic matter to supplement the nutrient levels on your farm. But if there's a way that you can do that by using cover crops that are then tilled over or fall or go back into the soil, that creates higher fertility levels in the soil. It brings the carbon levels up in the soil because you got carbon sequestering there. And if you can add no-till into that practice, then you don't get the soil compaction too, and that's an advantage to the crop when it's growing.
And so all those things will benefit the crop itself when they finally plant the actual corn or soybeans that we normally think of in crops. It'll make it ideally a better crop, better harvest, better test weight, all that fun stuff.
Well, I don't know if I would say ideally it would make it a better crop, but it does make it. It does help you on the bottom line when it comes to what do you have to invest in fertilizer and inputs from outside your farm.
Okay. So instead of adding more expense, you're saving money rather than spending it, is the basic gist of what I'm getting, correct?
Yeah, that's what you're looking at. You may have to spend a little money on buying a cover crop, whether that be rye or clover or alfalfa or something like that you're going to plant. But Mother Nature is a great healer, and so when you put that seed into the ground and it sprouts, that whole nutrient cycle where it's pulling nutrients out of the soil and using that to produce organic matter up above the ground, and then when you come in and you knock that down and put it back into the soil, that puts fertility back in the soil. The plants use the sunlight and the air and the nutrients to create organic matter. And then as that breaks down in the soil, it changes the soil structure, and it provides its own nutrient levels so that you don't have to use so many inputs from the outside.
Science, it's amazing. Especially on a farm.
Yes, Mother Nature is amazing.
A lot of people don't think really agriculture. I heard it once said agriculture is trying to, when you're doing it naturally, what you're basically trying to do is hijack natural systems. You're just trying to manage what already happens in nature to the best of your extent and your abilities. You're not really necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel. You're just trying to let nature do what it does.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Although we like to think with our research and looking at different cover crops and different ways to farm and how does that work within the whole system. Mm-hmm. We're trying to tweak and to fine tune those things that Mother Nature does best, and how
take
can we
out
take
the inefficiencies.
Yes, that would be a good way to put it. We're always trying to take out the inefficiencies and to be more efficient on what we do every year.
Again, I'm always amazed by how amazing it works. It's incredible. The little building blocks of life. Now, this is my favorite. Oh, wait, feel free to go on.
Okay. No, I'm fine. As I was saying, part of what we're doing is we're looking at cover crops too that maybe are are a long-term benefit to the soil. One of the things that always happens when you do the transition from conventional farming to organic is the system kind of breaks down and everything kind of shuts down, so that the new system can start and put itself into place. And so we're looking at ways that we can help farmers in that transition, so that he's not limited to either just putting it in some hay ground for a couple of years, or letting it set fallow for a couple of years while he goes through that organic transition. We want to look at ways that we can help that farmer make money during the transition period.
So being active during the transition period instead of passive.
Yes, very much so. Are there ways to grow crops during that transition period? And because a lot of farmers either put the ground in hay or they let it set fallow during that organic transition period, and there's always a cost to that.
Yes, there is. Now, this is my favorite question to ask you because I'm sorry, I love rampant speculation. Where do you see organic agriculture going in the next few years? This is like one of my favorite questions to ask people who have the experience in the industry that you have.
Well, if you ask that question to 10 different people, you get 10 different answers. You probably know that. But here's what we see at Micheal Fields. One of the things that we start to see organic producers looking at is biodynamic organic agriculture, or some people call it organic plus, where you're looking at a whole farm system trying to do organic farming without inputs from the outside. It's kind of an interesting concept, and it's kind of getting back to maybe the way things used to be. If you go back into the 1920s and 30s, where a farm was kind of self-sustaining, you had livestock, you had lots of different crop rotations involved, and it was kind of a sustainable operation. So we see some people looking at that, and that maybe there's some interest in that. And we've already seen it in some areas like wine and small grains and poultry production, where they're actually marketing their products as biodynamic products and being a kind of a whole sustainable entity without a lot of inputs from the outside. So that's one of the things that we see happening in organic agriculture. And then the other thing that we're looking at and working on some, and we think has some potential, is looking at the food grade side in both small grains and corn and soybeans. We think that we're going to see more of a demand for that as companies get into producing organic products, and how do you supply someone like a Kashi that wants to provide organic cereals and they need organic grains and they need it in bigger volumes that maybe a small farm can't supply. So how do we get those food grade products growing and into the system? So we're looking at food grade. We think that's something that's going to need some research and some work done in the future as companies grow and start to do more of those products in the organic sector. And then the other side of it that I always look at is that when I have a conversation with a farmer, I always have that conversation about what are you looking for? What are you trying to do different? How do you run your operation? And I think we're looking at a time where even with conventional farmers, they're starting to look at how do I reduce nutrient levels, nutrient and soil runoff on my farms, and how can I do a better job of farming? So we're really looking at engaging the conventional side. And even if someone's not interested in going organic, how can they institute cover crops and no-till in a conventional operation? And we have farmers that are doing that now, and I think we're going to see that expand in the future.
Yeah, it really is incredible. I had actually one of my local farmers that I've been friends with for years. They're not an organic operation. They have like one field of hay that they keep in organic because the guy they rent from wants it that way. But even at
Yeah.
that, even though they're conventional, they use cover crops. They try to do as much no-till as possible. They're open to a little bit of experimentation in their operation because they want to see what it does.
Yeah, and I think conventional farmers are interested in that. They're open to looking at new ways and things they can do. One of the things that our policy side at Micheal Fields is interested in and is doing is we're trying to bring more, I want to say, identification or more interest in what's happening with the Mississippi River and then as it drains into the Gulf and the dead zone down there, and how that affects the fishermen, especially shrimpers down in that area. So we've been doing work trying to bring more notice to that and bring that more to the forefront. And we've been working with Wisconsin farmers, connecting them with fishermen down in the Louisiana, Mississippi area. And so where they're exchanging information and just bringing more awareness to that issue. And we think that one of the greatest ways to solve the problem with soil and nutrient runoff in the upper Midwest is with cover crops. I mean, there's no better way to solve that problem than to get all farmers to use cover crops and to hold the soil and the nutrients in place on their land.
Now, kind of going back around to what you're talking about, food grade grains. Do you think that we're going to see like organic? I always get too mixed up, but I think it's Organic Valley that buys from small family farms and then markets the milk as kind of like a co-op. Do you think we're going to see something like that for grains and small farmers?
Well, I'm not sure if you'll see something like an Organic Valley start up in the grain side. It's highly possible, but we think that, right now there's been such a demand for corn and soybeans just to feed the livestock in the organic industry. We haven't really concentrated on the food side yet.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been the huge demand that we see, but we are starting to see companies wanting that demand. We're not talking about, a small grain mill coming in and buying, 20 or 30 acres of grain. We're talking about needing thousands of acres of of organic grain out there in order to supply a company. So I don't know as we'll see, something like an Organic Valley form in the grain industry, but I do think we're going to see farmers start to grow to reach that market.
Okay.
Now, how that'll take place, I don't know for sure how that'll take place, but I think that the farmers are starting to see that there's some advantages and a price premium for growing food grade products out there.
It's, again, fascinating to see these trends and kind of what they lead to.
Yeah.
Well, Perry, you were going to say something.
No, go ahead. We're fine. No, we're fine. Go ahead.
I was going to say, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything you'd like to plug or share with our audience about what Micheal Fields Agricultural Institute is doing, how they can get involved?
Sure. As a private and nonprofit institute, we're always looking for people to support us. So I would be remiss in not pointing that out, that we're always interested in people coming and talking with us and being interested in the same issues we are. And if they're willing to support us, we're always happy to do that. I always encourage people to visit our website at michealfields.org. And also to look us up on Facebook and Twitter if that's what they use as their main mode into the internet world. And then I'd kind of like to talk, if someone's interested in climate control, on June 4th, we're going to have a session on a Sunday afternoon on climate change and how that affects agriculture, and kind of bring how the organic farming can help with climate change and how it does a nice job of sequestering carbon and can just support climate change here in the U.S. and the climate change issues. So I encourage people to look that up, and if they're interested, to come and join us on June 4th for a nice discussion on climate change issues.
All right. Well, Perry, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk about this stuff. hopefully we can have you again on the show sometime.
That would be my pleasure, Terrence. Thank you for having me.
Be sure to take a look at Micheal Fields' website and Facebook page. The links are in the description. You can support the show by subscribing to whatever listening medium you're using, leaving a review, and saying something nice. You can even compliment my hair if you want to. Follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The links are in the description. Thanks for listening. This has been Terrence Leahy and the Intellectual Agrarian Podcast reminding you to keep farming the dream.